So, welcome back everybody who is taking a break, and we are into our afternoon sessions. This afternoon, we have Chris Beckett and Shane Ludke here. They are the hosts of the Actual Astronomy podcast. It's a twice-a-week podcast, listener-driven audio program focused on visual observing. Between their partnership with the National Science Foundation's 365 Days of Astronomy and their own feeds, the Actual Astronomy podcast gets over 30,000 downloads per month. Chris and Shane met while serving terms as RASC Center presidents at Regina Center. So they are longstanding members of the society and do quite a bit for us here. For now, I am going, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw it over to Chris and Shane. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jenna. It's good to be here this afternoon, see so many people. Do we have Dave lined up with us too? Is he present and accountable?
I'm here.
Awesome. All right. Then what we will do is in our usual format, Shane, do you mind doing a bit of a countdown and we will just get rocking and rolling?
Yeah, sounds good. 3, 2, 1.
The joy of observing on episode 423 of the Actual Astronomy podcast in front of a live virtual audience at the 2024 RASC GA. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who enjoys going out under the stars. So today, Dave Chapman is joining us. And Dave, you've been on the podcast many times before, including last year when you created a mini-series called Stars You Should Know, and that toured listeners and us around the night sky with the stops at all the important stars. So thanks for joining us again this afternoon, Dave.
Glad to be here. That was a fun podcast series, and I should say that it's still available if people want to go and review those episodes.
Yeah. You know, and I would say, Chris, and keep me honest here, but that series might have been our most popular. Like, I think we got a lot of listener emails and engagement as a result of that. So thanks, Dave. That was really a lot of fun.
Well, it was helpful for me too, because, you know, I'd been working on this idea for a while, and I wasn't sure how interesting it would be. So the positive listener response was actually very inspirational for me, and it made me, you know, it gave me a little bit of extra sort of energy to complete the project. So in my mind's eye, I see a book, but it's slow going, unfortunately.
Awesome. So today we're not going to do what we told Jenna we were going to do. We told Jenna we were going to do a show on the observing programs. But Jenna, we apologize. We decided against that. So we're going to instead do something a little bit lighter and perhaps a little bit more entertaining for folks. We're going to dive into the joy of observing with some of the other folks who have spoken before. We're kind of hinting at. But what happened was when we were chatting with Dave, he kind of hatched this idea based on an old book. And so, you know, Dave, you've got that book in your possession there. Do we just want to start there and sort of
I guess we could. First of all, I want to stand up and show my T-shirt. I hope people could read this. Did you read it?
Yeah, I shall read it. You can't buy happiness, but you can buy a telescope, and that's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I think I live by those words, Dave.
Oh, yeah, you guys do. Absolutely. So, yeah. So I guess one of the reasons I suggested a change of title, Joy of Observing, is, well, you know, the RASC has a very long history in promoting visual observations. It goes back quite a long ways. And in terms of organized activities, and we will talk about the observing programs, Jenna, don't worry. It's all part of the fun. So I was going through my stuff, and I came across this book that I picked up. It's a bit of a collector's item, and it's called The Joy of Gazing, and it's written by David Levy, okay? And this was when he was a member of the Montreal Center. And it's called The Joy of Gazing, A Personal Guide for a New Observer by David H. Levy. This is the second edition, and it's published by the Montreal Center of the RASC, and this one comes from 1984. I'm not sure where I got it, but it's got his signature on it. It's a signed copy, so It's one of the earliest sort of publications along these lines, if you don't count the Observer's Handbook. And, in here, he kind of, he does, it's not an observing textbook or guidebook. It's just kind of like getting people inspired and giving them advice on how to get started. It's very concise and to the point, but it's sort of the beginning of a legacy of publications around observing the night sky and promoting the night sky. Of course, a lot of us will remember the Beginner's Observing Guide by Leo Enright, which went into 6 editions, which was kind of like a spiffed up version of David Levy's pamphlet. But, those guys were pretty good pals. So I feel that this was kind of like the successor to that, okay? And then somehow we kind of lost control over that book, and we ended up starting from scratch. And then we had the Explore the Universe book, which is a lot slimmer. But the point behind this book was that we had come out with the Explore the Universe program, and this book is actually very correlated with what you have to do to get that certificate. So this was like a little bit more pointed, whereas the Beginner's Observing Guide was more direct, more general. And this book, the Explorer of the Universe Guide, 3rd edition, it has some basic starting stuff, but it also directly addresses the various objectives of the Explore the Universe program. So we heavily endorse people getting that. And so what I was saying was there's a long tradition of visual observing in the RASC, and I don't want to go through a blow-by-blow history, but basically it started with the Messier list certificate, which came about in the early 80s. The RASC put together an official list and created an observing program in the early 80s. And many of us here at the Halifax Center that have been around for a while completed that list. And there's quite a few people across the RASC completed that list. That was followed up very quickly by the successor to that was the finest NGC objects, which was another list of 110 objects that were maybe a little bit more challenging, but no less interesting than Messier. And a number of people followed those. And then there was a couple more challenging certificates. I guess there was the Deep Sky Challenge, and then there was David Levy's Deep Sky Gems.
Yeah.
And then more recently, then there was the Isabel Williamson Explorer, Lunar Observers. How does that go? Isabel Williamson Lunar Observing Program, IWLOP, which was very comprehensive, but a lot of people found it a little intimidating. So we came up with Explore the Moon, which is like, it was like the Isabel program light. It was like just 100 things, and it was fairly easy to accomplish. And a lot of people started observing the moon using that. And the other thing was about that was that when we cooked that up, Patrice Scadlin and me and Ted Dunphy was involved. Patrice's objective was to, find something that could get people started learning how to use their instruments, their telescopes. So observe the moon. Explore the Moon isn't so much about observing the moon. Of course it is, but what it's really about is getting people to learn how to use their telescopes, because the moon is an easy target and there's lots of detail to see. There's lots of contrast. And so, it took the faint fuzzy aspect of observing out of the equation. You didn't have to go to a dark site. You could go to your backyard and observe the moon, learn how to use your telescope. And then from there, you could move on to other things.
So Dave.
Yeah.
Starting with the moon. It's a great spot to get going. I like what Randy Enkin was saying about starting with the moon and for sketching the moon as well, and it makes a great focus.
Yes.
For the beginner observer. Where did you get started in all this? Like, where did you get started in the observing and in the sketching, if you do that as well.
Well, how far back do you want to go?
Well, I've got my DeLorean ready. Let's hop in and go. We'll put Shane in the trunk.
So I turned 70 last year, and so I'm officially a curmudgeon now. But I reflected on the fact that that when I turned 70 on my birthday, I had actually, that marked 60 years of me observing the sky through a telescope. Because when I was 10 years old, living out in Winnipeg, Transcona, actually, my parents gave me a little 60 millimeter Tasco refractor for my birthday. I don't know how that came about. I don't remember asking for one, but I was coming home with Sky and Telescope magazines from a sympathetic teacher at school and poring over them and leaving them out strategically, around the house with open to the Unitron ads of, So I ended up with this Tasco refractor. My birthday was the 21st of July, 1963. And I started keeping a logbook. Don't ask me why. I was a little scientist in training. I started keeping a logbook, and the page 1 of my logbook is it's a list of things that I saw on the moon with my telescope. There's no sketching. It was just a list, a checklist of things. So like the first thing that I recorded was the moon, because there it was. And then a little while later, a month or two later, I made my first astronomical sketch or drawing, if you like, and that was of the moon. So that's where I got started. So I'm right on that program of looking at the moon, and then I went on from there.
Do you still have that sketch, Dave?
Oh yeah, I do.
That's cool.
Yeah. If there's a lull in the program, I'll run over to my bookcase and pull out my logbook from 1963. But I was also looking at Jupiter and the moons. In Galileo's book where he has this picture of the Jupiter, and there's 4 moons and there's 4 moons, and then there's only 3 moons. Well, I did that with my own telescope, and I don't know whether I'd looked at Galileo's stuff before that, but I go back there and it says this could have been Galileo's notebook. I watched I don't know if it was an occultation or an eclipse. I'd have to go back and see. But I watched, a moon disappear on Jupiter with my little telescope, and that was pretty exciting. And I watched an eclipse of the moon. I could see Saturn's rings. I was terribly excited, and so I've been an observer for that long. I've always, I do a bit of photography too. I dabble, but I've always been a visual observer.
Just want to touch back with Shane really quick. Shane, how did you get started? Like, what was your big sort of getting started moment?
Successfully started or failed started?
Well, I remember you talked about your mother taking you to the observatory, way back.
Yeah. So my first real memory, I think I was around 10 years old, and I always had an interest in astronomy. So my mother took me to the Regina Club's observatory, which I think had a 4-inch. Oh, gee, I can't remember the name of the telescope now. Who made it?
It was a Brashear.
Brashear, yeah. And they were looking at Saturn that night. And, like many folks, the first time you see Saturn, it just imprints on you for the rest of your days. And that's what that view was like. And I still remember, I thought for sure they were playing a trick on me, and that they had just attached like a photograph of Saturn at the end of that tube. I didn't think there was any way possible that I was seeing that planet live at that time. And it just really kind of cemented that interest in astronomy for me.
And so Shane, before we go back to Dave, just really quick from there, because we might have people that might be in that same similar situation. How did you move from that sort of first initial impression of being wowed through the telescope to being somebody who was setting up in their own backyard, or sometimes my hilltop with their instruments?
Yeah, well, there's quite a gap there. I needed to start making money, and that took a few years from the age of 10. So I bought my first telescope from a department store. I bought it from Winners, and it was not a very good telescope. And I tried to look at the moon and was unsuccessful. But my real, or where I really got into astronomy was when I bought an 8-inch Newtonian, and then At that point, I was just going to look at solar system stuff for the rest of my life, starting with the moon and Jupiter, and then realized that's not always up in the sky, and thought I better start looking at some other stuff. And, it just kind of progressed from there.
Cool. And Dave, how about you? How did you make that initial progression from somebody who was simply just exposed to astronomy to somebody who was setting up their own instruments?
Well, it's hard to remember that long ago, but this is exactly why you should keep a logbook. Because it reminds you of what you did, when you did it, what you were looking at. And in my case, I actually write down who I'm with, which is actually kind of a fun thing to do. When I look back in my log, I'll say, well, I looked at this comet, so, and then it says the people that were with me were so-and-so, Dave Lane and Mary Lou Whitehorn and what. So I'm looking at my logbook over here, and I can see how I progressed exactly. First of all, it's in a 3-ring binder this is only 1963 to 1970. And I moved on to other things. And here's that first page. 3 days after I got my telescope, there's my list of things in my childish handwriting.
Is your handwriting still childish? We have to know.
It's actually printing. I got a report from school that my handwriting was illegible, and my father made me copy out a page every day during my summer break. I'd have to copy out a page for a book and show it to him at the end of the day, and I improved my handwriting a lot. Awesome. And here it is, folks.
First sketch?
This is my first sketch.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
And I was so confident. I used a pen.
Wow.
This is not a pen. It's like, I didn't know. I didn't know you were supposed to use a pencil and maybe erase your mistakes. I just went for it.
I'm coming out strong.
And then here's my moon or my Jupiter, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So that's a really good reason to keep a logbook. Not to prove to anybody you did anything, but just for to aid your own memory. Write it down and go back and recover those memories. Mm-hmm. I see Judy's nodding. Judy is an exemplary log keeper. She'll look at a crater on the moon, and then she'll write a whole page verbal description of it plus a sketch and turn the page, and here you go. Here I go. I thought it was an eclipse. I corrected it. It's an occultation of Io.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
That was the same year, October. So I'm getting pretty sophisticated there.
Chris, what was your first your early memories and your first start?
Well, my uncle, he bought me a little telescope, a little Tasco, the absolute cheapest Tasco money can buy. And I set it up. I got it for Christmas. I was very excited. I was 6 years old. And I pointed it at the brightest star, which I could see in the night sky, which I now know is Sirius. And I was just like ready to look through that telescope, because I knew when I looked through that telescope that I would see the planets around Sirius, because I knew that other stars probably had planets. I was pretty sure I'd probably see some aliens whizzing around in spaceships. I was like ready for this. And when I looked through, I was just so incredibly disappointed that it only made it marginally brighter than I could see it with my unaided eye. In fact, through the window, I could scarcely tell the difference between the view through the telescope and the view with the unaided eye. So I was a little bit disappointed. So it was probably another 5 or 6 years before I had the chance to actually look through a reasonable telescope. But I was really gunning for it. I was always bugging my parents to take me somewhere where I could look through an instrument or to get me a telescope. But they assured me that if they bought me a telescope, that I would promptly lose interest in a matter of days. And of course, you guys are laughing pretty hard because that was many decades ago now.
But statistically, it's probably true, because judging by the number of cheap telescopes that are on Kijiji these days that have never been used or used once and never touched again, that is pretty common. So
they also didn't want to buy me a computer, and of course, I've been having a career in the computer industry for nearly as long.
Well, what do parents know, eh?
Exactly. But we're not here to give you family advice, though, today, folks.
For For
You
Jenna's
don't want
sake,
it from us, I'm pretty sure.
I want to bring the conversation back to observing
Good stuff.
certificates, because for Jenna, and also there's a good message here. And I've discussed this with others. So like my early observing was pretty hodgepodge. I would just go out and look at things and write them down, but there was no systematic approach to anything. And so I kept on going back to the same old things, right? The low hanging fruit, the easy things to find. But here's the thing. If you follow an observing program with the objective of earning a certificate, it gives you a structure. It gives you a goal, and so you go out and you say, okay, tonight I'm going to look at these things and I'm going to observe them and I'm going to write them down, and then the next time I'm going to do some more. And it's really, really important to have a goal like that to improve your observing. Gives you something to strive for, and that's really the why it's good to go for a certificate, not for some pretty thing you can hang on your wall so much, but just for the personal satisfaction and the sense of accomplishment. And it really does make a difference if you have a goal. And so, I haven't done all of the certificates myself, but I've done several of them.
So Dave, what ones have you completed? What ones are you working on or thinking about?
Well, I did my Messier back in the 80s. I started on the Finest NGC, but I found that I wasn't getting out to dark sky sites as often as I liked. So honestly, the next observing program I completed was Isabel Williamson in 2010. Like, that's fast forwarding a lot. But you remember, Chris, I met you out at 2009. I came out to Saskatchewan, and it was the International Year of Astronomy, and I had done a lot of outreach and stuff. And I said, I want to do something else. I want to do something for myself. And I decided there and then that I was going to do the Isabel Williamson program, and I worked at it. And I got it. I finished that fairly quickly because that's pretty much all I did. I was observing at night. I'd spend the day. I wasn't working back then, and I'd spend the day planning my evening. And I'd go out and I'd have like a dozen things I wanted to observe, and I'd observe them, and then I'd write them up. And then I discovered that you could finish twice as fast if you actually got up in the morning for the phases that were after full moon, and like you could get up in the morning before anyone else did and be observing, at 5 in the morning and looking at the last quarter. Now, mind you, if you're a working person or going to school, this is perhaps the best idea. But at the time, I wasn't working, so I would do that, and then I would sleep for the rest of the day. But I got that completed fairly quickly. What else have I done? I've started a lot. I had a pretty good whack at the double stars. I think I'm about a third of the way through the double star program.
Yeah.
Because when Blake was putting that together, we were, you and I and other people were pretty adamant that, you can't just come up with an observing program. You have to have people like try it out. And
it seemed disingenuous for us not to observe them before we approved it. I didn't get through it myself, but I certainly observed many of them. But yeah.
No, I really like it. And again, it's another thing you can do from your backyard. Yeah. You don't have to, there's no getting in the car and loading your equipment and driving an hour to a dark sky place and setting up. You just go outside. And if you're lucky, you have a little shed or garage you can keep a telescope set up in. You don't need anything too fancy. Mm-hmm. And you can observe a double star, assuming you can find it. That's the trickiest part. But then you've got the double star in your field of view, and you make a very simple drawing of it. I mean, nothing could be simpler than dots on a paper, right? Mm-hmm. In a circle. And then you go in. The way it works, you go in and you don't really know what you're looking at. It's a double star, but then you go in and see what you've drawn. And then you compare it to the detailed information in the double star program, where it actually tells you, okay, there's component A and component B and component C, and they're this far apart and this many degrees. You don't know that before you go ahead and look for it. So Blake's idea, and it was pretty brilliant, was this is a double star, go and look and see what you can see. And then you come back later and you see if what you saw was what he had expected you to see or intended you to see. And sometimes you have to go back a second time, but it's a really good program for that.
And you know who is working on that program?
Well, everybody, right? You. Yeah.
Shane, I believe, is working on it. Do I have that correct?
It's one of my favorite programs right now, or
Yeah.
favorite lists. Similar to you, Dave, I did the Messier many years ago, started on the Finest NGC, kind of got distracted, but recently picked up Blake's list and I love it. It's so fun. And partly because, as you mentioned, like it's backyard accessible. I take 20 steps out my door and I can do 2 or 3 hours of observing and see a lot of really interesting double stars. And there's been a number of times where I log my observation, come in and reference Blake's notes and go, holy cow, there's a third star there that I didn't see. You know, I need more aperture. I need more magnification. So then I go back and have another look, and it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy that list.
Yeah, I was really busy doing this a couple of years ago in the fall, at the last opposition of Mars, because I went out and had my telescope all set up and I was observing Mars, and I'd focus on Mars and observe it for a while and say, well, this is what I can see, but I'm going to wait to see if the conditions improve. So I'm going to wait half an hour or an hour. And in between, what I do is I would go and observe some double stars, and I'd rack up a couple double stars in between and then go back to Mars. So in that, I had this little notebook. This is my sketchbook. And so here's an example. Okay, I think, do I have one? So here's an example. Like I sketched Mars, okay, in my 12-inch telescope, and then I'd go and say, okay, let's go and look at a double star, and then I go over and I'd do a double star. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So like I had a circle on my paper, and I go in and put a whole bunch of dots where the stars were, and then I'd turn the drive off of the telescope and see what part of the field disappeared first, and that determined where west was in the sky. Celestial west, very easy to do. It works for any kind of telescope. Doesn't matter what kind of optics you have. Just turn off your drive and watch how it drifts. That's west. Close enough. I'd come back in and I'd put the little crosshairs on it, and then I'd look up and figure out what the components were and everything, and I'd write down little notes here, what I was using and whether there was any color and so on and so forth. So that's my double star log right there. I told Blake, I'm not using your forms. And I said, this is what I'm doing. And he told me, I think I have it on an email. He told me it was okay. So
he authorized that. That's good.
So yeah, he authorized. I just said, look, I can't do it your way. He had these very complicated forms and you had to write all these words. And I said, no, I just want to draw them and put everything on the paper because I'm lazy.
We should mention really quick that Blake was a dear friend of ours, and unfortunately he passed away.
That was
late last summer. Yeah. But we have a few comments from people. One person said, because I referred to a task, they said that's when Tasca still made a quality product. Sadly, right. I'm not of that vintage. I was in the transitory phase, I think, of Tasca. This was not a very good instrument.
Somebody had one of those sale on Facebook Marketplace nearby here a couple months ago. They wanted $40 for it. And I said to my wife, I said, that telescope, I never have it anymore. I said, that telescope that I started on, there's one just like it on sale. And I said, it's only $40. And she looked at me with that look like, do you really need another telescope?
Yes,
said,
you
no,
do.
I don't need it. But
look behind Shane.
Anyway,
we'll find the answer to your question.
That's not even all of them.
I was hesitated, dallied, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
But I told the vendor, I said, this is the telescope I got started on. It's a not bad telescope. It's not a great telescope, but it, for somebody starting, and my memory was that it had really good optics. Okay. And so I do think there was a change. That's when whoever said that, I agree with them. Was when Tasco was good.
Yeah.
I have a Tasco from, I believe it's 1969. It's a 76 millimeter aperture, 1200 millimeter focal length. And the optics were made by Royal Astro Optics. And it is fantastic. It's a really, really good scope.
I picked one up from a woman who was selling it. It was her husband's telescope, so it had one owner. and it was one of those old Tascos that had the original wooden case and everything. Yeah. And I bought it from her and messed around with it for a while, cleaned it up, got it working, and now it's in the Dorner Telescope Museum. I gave it to Randall, and I said, this is not a Canadian telescope, but it's a telescope that a lot of Canadians typically used to become amateur astronomers. So I think it has a place in the museum, and he agreed with me. Well, so that's where it is now. And all the original parts, it's amazing.
Yeah, those are time capsules, those boxes. It's neat to see how they were packaged. And if you're lucky, some of the previous owners may have left logs behind or other paraphernalia that just sort of adds to the story and the history.
Unfortunately, those vintage, they're the narrow eyepieces, the smaller eyepieces, which aren't bad for the telescope. It's just these days, first of all, they're hard to get anymore. But for the long focal lengths, they were the kind of basic eyepieces they had, like they were Huygens and things like that. They were okay for those kind of telescopes. But you can get adapter diagonals.
Somebody wrote, "There's no such thing as failure, only learning opportunities."
Sure.
That's why I spend so much time learning. Bill wrote a snide comment. I'm not going to read it, but Bill was kind of giving me a hard time in his presentation, I felt, about, because I'm the person who makes his own chalk for my sketching. And
well, that's pretty random.
Well, he was talking about you showing his beautiful sketches through his 20-inch. And
how do you make chalk? I mean,
you get a stick of chalk and then you just kind of rub it on paper. This is like...
Okay. We're getting off the topic, I think.
I'm just reading the comments.
So we should say
Jenna was going to read the comments, but
I can if you want me to.
It's okay.
So we should say, getting back to observing certificates, it's me that's being true. We should say, right, that on the RASC website, on the observing area of the website, there's, really a lot of information about observing and how to observe and what you're expected to do to earn a certificate. It's a lot to read, I have to say, but there are some videos that we made about maybe it's getting to be old now, 6 years ago, maybe. We made a few like little 3-minute videos about all the different observing programs. So if somebody wants just like a very quick introduction overview, go there and have a look at those videos. They're not very long, and the narrator is John Reed, and we put them together. At least watch the first one on the beginner programs. The other ones, you can watch them if you want, but certainly everyone should at least watch the beginner ones to get an idea of what's needed and what's involved. And we had, back in those days, we had a couple of online courses, didn't we, Jenna, during COVID and that?
We did. We actually did the Explore the Moon program online. And
Explore the Universe, yeah. Did we not?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
We did both, yeah. And those are very good. And we picked up quite a lot of members, actually, from those. Actually, RASC Halifax Center picked up Lisa Ann Fanning, joined the Halifax Center. Yeah. Because I met her at one of those things, and she was very interactive, and she said something about, I'm going to join the RASC. And I said, well, if you're going to join the RASC, you should join the RASC Halifax Center, because we're cool. And she did. And she's quite... Yeah.
Dave, we have a very important question from one of the members in the chat, which we're actually going to throw to our audience in this meeting. The question is, do you need a new telescope? Please vote and help us decide if Dave should get a new telescope.
89, 93, 95.
Come on, yes, let's go. We got, come on, everybody, we need an answer with 85.
I voted.
The people have spoken, Dave.
People have spoken. It's time for you to get a new telescope.
Yeah.
Wasn't there some sort of conservation law where you have to get rid of a telescope to get a new one after a certain number?
Never heard that.
Yeah, I think you're confused.
Well, let me put it this way. If you ask me how many I have, I'd have to stop and think. Honestly, I can't just come like I have this many telescopes, because I've got from the very smallest to the biggest. I'd have to sit down and actually work it out. I can tell you how many guitars I have, which is a similar kind of obsession. So
now that's off topic.
yes, it is, but it's an indication of character type, right?
So, Dave, I like what you mentioned about meeting other people, because this is what the RASC is really all about. I mean, you can do astronomy on your own. You don't need to belong to an organization. No. But to meet other people, I think, is one of the great things that we can do in this society. And finding other people to observe with is an awful lot of fun.
Oh, it's so important.
Yeah, I remember that's how you and I met. I first met you and the other members of the Halifax Center at a star party, and then you folks sucked me into observing and being involved in the Halifax Center, like you mentioned, with somebody else. But what are some of the other experiences and motivators and people that you've met under the night sky? If you have anything to share on that, I think it's worthwhile to talk about those experiences.
You know, I had actually thought about that too, like why observe with other people. And while I was chair of the observing committee and evaluating people's applications and so on, I quite often came across people who were a little bit unsure about how to proceed and like whether they were doing things right. And I would talk to them, and it would turn out that the people who were the most unsure and the most uncertain were the ones that were trying to do it themselves. And I would say that, you know, you just need to get out and with other people in observing alongside and like look through their telescopes. They can look through your telescope. You can try different eyepieces. I mean, the list goes on of what the benefits are of observing with people. And that is even before you get to the whole camaraderie part. When you observe with somebody, you sort of develop this camaraderie that stays with you a long time, a very long time. And to give you an example, when I was, say, 16-ish, I was in a youth center. A youth member of the Ottawa Center. I don't know if anybody online remembers, was around back then. That was in 68, and we had a bunch of people. They had the regular meeting every month, and then there was the observers group where the observers came, and it was mostly young people. And so I was hanging out with people like Ken Hewitt-White, who went on to become a planetarium presenter and author and so on, and Rolf Meyer, Comet Discoverer, Doug George, people like that. And, that goes back a long way. And there's some really good memories. Like the time that I went out with Ken to observe some grazing occultation or something or other. And we'd have pulled out this huge 8-inch telescope from the back of his car, which in 1968, that was a huge telescope, right? So, and this memory sticks in my brain, this experience I had with them. Plus star parties. I was going to say something about star parties. Absolutely, this year, put it on your list for this year. Go to at least one star party this summer. By hook or by crook, get yourself there, because that is the ultimate in observing with other people.
Why? Why should people do that?
Because you have so many people collected in one place with a common purpose, and the focus is astronomy. And I've never been to a star party that I didn't love the experience. There's the comradeship, but there's also, you learn so much and you see so much gear, and it's really thrilling to go to a star party.
Jen, I got to ask Jenna. Jenna, have you been to a star party yet?
Oh, no.
Oh, you have to go to a star party this summer.
Yeah, you got to put it on your list, Jenna.
I'll add it to my list. If I twist my rubber arm, I'll go to the Saskatchewan star party. Oh, no, too bad.
Yeah. Cool. What about you, Shane? What are your experiences or memories observing with people?
Oh, it's sometimes the astronomy becomes like a secondary byproduct, of the night.
Yeah.
It becomes just a social get together where you're laughing and sharing stories, which is always enjoyable. But, another thing that I really love about observing with friends or other folks is just, I tend to observe more because somebody finds an object. So you go to their telescope, check it out. Then you go to the next one, see what they're looking at. And then you come back and find something on your own and share those views. And that's so much fun. I really get exposed to different categories of objects too that I probably wouldn't have on my list. Or even better is when somebody is there with big aperture that I don't have to haul around and pack and store and all that kind of stuff, and I can just steal views through their big telescopes. That's probably my favorite.
In the chat, Victor said that star parties are where you go to get to collimate your scope by committee.
That's
fair.
Yeah, if you like unsolicited advice, go to a star party. That's for sure.
I remember there used to be a Cape Breton star party, didn't they? Their slogan was "We put the party back in Star Party," but then they had to disband for reasons that we can't talk about on this anyway. True story. You know what? I always love going out to the St. Croix Observatory. It's really cool to see that video before this. It was really appropriate to see that since that's where I met many of the Halifax Center members. Somebody had referenced Michael Gatto as a great sketcher, and I met Mike Gatto. Go ahead.
He's phenomenal.
He's amazing, eh?
Yeah.
And Mike, so it's amazing to think. So I met Mike out there probably 20 or 25 years ago. He was sketching the Messiers. He sketched the finest NGCs. And I remember that really made this big impression on me. And eventually I took up sketching. But it's amazing to think Michael and I are still in regular communication. We were just Zooming last week and we were chatting about sketching, but we work on the RASC Observers calendar together.
Right.
And that's sort of something for maybe the people who are relatively new to the RASC who are here today listening to this is how we all meet many times, is we meet under the stars. And then even though we might live in different places, I've lived in several places across the country, belong to many centers and different organizations, but lived in Halifax for a while. That's how Dave and I know each other. But now we sort of live, several thousand kilometers away, but we continue to work and collaborate on different projects together and to share our experiences under the stars and talk about observing programs.
The hardest part about working with you, Chris, is trying to keep track of what time zone you're in.
Hey, look, my time zone doesn't change. I'm in Saskatchewan.
I know. Like, so the other night when Chris wanted to invite me to this thing, like I'm lying in bed and I get, ding. It's like, hey, Dave, let's talk about the GA. I'm in bed, for crying out loud. What time is it where you are? It's like 9 o'clock for you. You're ready to chat. And what was it for me? Like almost midnight or something? I was like, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
From time to time, we've considered running the RASC and UTC time.
Yeah, great. So that gave me another thought, though, sketching. And I want to clear up something. Having been on the observing committee and been the chair of that, so on, I think a lot of people, when they hear us say, hey, you should sketch things, I think people sometimes get a bit scared by that. I think they're intimidated. So the typical answer you get from people is, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I can't draw anything. I couldn't possibly do that." But the thing you have to realize for astronomy is, when we suggest, it's not mandatory, but when we suggest, hey, sketch what you see, we're not looking for Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo. We're looking for your memory of what you saw, just like as simple as it needs to be. Like the ones that I showed you from when I was a kid. You just put something on paper that helps you remember what you saw, because it's your drawing, and when you look at it, you will remember what you saw. It doesn't matter if anyone else likes it. But the thing is, and Chris and Shane, I hope you'll back me up on this, if you do it as a habit, as a custom, as you do it, you actually get better at it. If the more you do it, the better you get. You don't get worse, you get better. So, and we don't expect
this is not golf, people.
It's we don't, for the certificates, when people we love it when people submit sketches, but we don't expect these beautiful pictures. Some of them can be, and some people are very good at it, but that's not what we're looking for. We're just looking at your memory aid of what you saw. And that's good enough. And you will get better.
Sketch? Can I share my sketch?
Oh, well, okay. Is this one of these chalky things on black?
Yeah, this is the chalk.
No, go away. That's a picture. That's a
No.
photograph.
No,
Get
that's
out of town.
that's my helix.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it, right?
Well, wait a minute. You got some astigmatism there in your telescope, or what are
It's
those
just
stars?
a cell phone. It's just a cell phone shot. Yeah.
A cell phone shot of your drawing.
Yep.
Oh, so I was right. It is a photograph.
Well, it's yeah.
It's amazing what you can do when you put a drawing through PixInsight.
Exactly.
Yes.
No, this is you can actually see the scratches from the chalk there, yeah. But yeah, you can get there by working on this for sure. It's something that like I said, anybody can achieve.
There's another cool thing I'm thinking of. I thought about these things since you invited me. One of the things I got doing, and I only use binoculars to do this, was I started looking for asteroids.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, again, when I was about 16, 17, I went out with my binoculars. I said, well, there's supposed to be, like, Pallas is supposed to be up here. And so I went out with my binoculars and I drew a star field, like just put dots everywhere, like dot, 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 dot. And then I went out the next night and looked at the same star field, did it again. And, by comparing the one with the other, I could see which one had moved. So that was the first time I, knew that I saw an asteroid by drawing it one night and drawing it the next night. And all I was doing was putting dots on a paper. I mean, that's how simple it can be, right? Dot on a paper. And
is that exactly what Clyde Tombaugh did all those years ago? Sketch comparator.
He did it with photographs, but yeah, he was comparing night to night, and I do that now with the Burt Gaffney Observatory. Except I do it in my sleep. But with all the recent RASC asteroids that were announced, I've been systematically waiting until they come to opposition, and then I set up the Burt Gaffney Observatory to take pictures. And if I snag one, I try to get one later in the night, like a couple hours later, and it's good enough you can see the motion. And so I found Dan Fox asteroid. He was very pleased when I sent in the pictures. Jedicke is not a recent asteroid, but it was recently at opposition, and I did that. That's not observing, it's not sketching, but it all started back there, right? When I was 16, looking at the asteroids in binoculars. That's where it started. And then you move on from there.
Very cool. So Shane, just want to make sure you have a chance to jump in here. We've been kind of going a bit.
Yeah.
No, I'll jump in whenever. So keep going. It's good.
Well, Shane, I know Chris is pretty intense on the sketching, and he's really trying to get sophisticated with his chalk and everything. But what stage are you at in your drawing of astronomical objects?
Well, I don't. So
he has some pencils.
Yeah. No, I'm not a sketcher at all.
That's okay.
I briefly had interest, but that quickly disappeared. I prefer to I have a little notepad and a pen, and when I'm observing, I just prefer to write down what I'm seeing and try to be as descriptive as possible. Occasionally, and this is more so with double stars, I'll plot the stars if I'm unsure that I have the right system, or I think I'm seeing like a third or fourth member that I don't know is really part of that system. And then, I'll take that inside and validate. But my logging is all verbal, written, and then I transpose it to a logging system on my iPad.
So one person I'd like to hear from, and he's not he's probably not expecting this, but I see Alan Dyer is with us. And the reason I want to bring him into the conversation is because if you open up the Observer's Handbook and look at the lists, the observing list, which became certificates, you see Alan Dyer's name all over them. So, Alan, can you share a few words about your perspective on observing the sky through telescopes and so on?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. um, uh, just doing some more image processing as I speak here. I just posted another eclipse shot. They keep coming. The eclipse that keeps giving. Yeah, the Messier list and the Finance NGC list date back from the late 70s to the early 80s when I had observing time on my hands. And the Messier list in the handbook at that time was just the list in numerical order, 1 through 110, or maybe not even 110. And of course, we know that that's not the order in which you can observe them. They're scattered all over the sky. So the first thought was to reorder them in the way that you would approach them across the sky from west to east, and which is something Messier always wanted to do, apparently, but never got around to it. The French Revolution intervened. So, and so that was the first thought. But then to put actual comments in, and those had to be based on actual observations. So It was all with the orange tube C8 at the time, which I thought would be pretty standard for most people. By then we were getting into larger scopes, and so not too small, but not big. Before the eras of big Dobbs. And then I thought, and then it was a couple of years. John Percy was, I think, the editor of the handbook at the time. And if John's in the audience, thank you, John. And improved, the redo of those two lists, or the redo of the Messier list, and then the addition of the Finance NGC, which went on to become one of the most popular lists in terms of other people, societies, whatever, wanting to reprint them and reuse it.
Yes,
it's in Starry Night and Sky Safari, things like that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a way better list than the Caldwell list. For beyond the Messier list. And so, but for that, now you've got 7,000 objects to pick from. You got to pick 110. So that took a lot of editing down and subjective call, what I think is better than the other, but to give a nice representative list of things to go after of all different types and whatever.
Well, like the double cluster is not a Messier object, but it's as bright or impressive as one, but it's an NGC object. Good example.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's objects like that should be Messiers. Messiers aren't necessarily the biggest and brightest of what's in the sky, because there are some dud Messiers. But to get a list that would, in many respects, be as good as the Messier list for people to work through, but probably a little bit beyond, in terms of a little fainter objects, and you do maybe need an 8-inch telescope or something a little larger, but still not difficult objects to tackle, except for IC 289. I threw that one in. That's a tough one.
You way around the sky for sure.
Yeah. And so that's been around since, now 40 years and still works well. And then it was later on that whoever at the time said, well, let's make the certificates. Maybe it was you. They
predate me.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, in terms of make the observing certificates.
But when at the time I was involved, we did a big push to get people observing again, and that had an impact. That's when we made the videos, and we're really pushing it. And we had a big uptick in the number of people handing in certificates. But it took a lot of coordination through all the centers, getting people to get up and give talks and so on. Probably should do that again. Here's my Alan Dyer story.
Preparing those lists really made me into, an experienced deep sky observer. And not that I've done a lot of visual. I still do too much photography.
But
I would agree with what you and Chris, Shane were saying, is that tackling any kind of list, whether it's one that's in the handbook or one you prepare for yourself, and just working through it, gives you a goal, and it's satisfying to complete. But it gives you, what am I going to look at tonight? It's the answer to that question. Yeah. What am I going to go after tonight? And then once you've got one list done under your belt, there's always another one.
There's always another one. Yeah.
And it just makes for a satisfying observing experience and observing life. And you become, as you've been saying, and Chris has been saying in terms of sketching, you get better and better and better at it, and making those logs, whether you are sketching or writing down, or as I do, as Shane does, to just verbally record on my phone and then transcribe them later.
Sure.
Just, record your observations so you've got that to work from and to remember and think about how bad an observer you were 20 years ago.
So everybody knows you as a superb astrophotographer. I saw you give a talk on astrophotography at one of the GAs, and the way you presented it was, I said, I don't care what everybody else is doing. I'm going to follow Alan Dyer from now on, because it's his approach is so straightforward. But everybody knows you as an astrophotographer, and you came to Nova East at one time and gave a couple talks. But this is what impressed me. After the talks were over, we were sitting around, we were hanging around, socializing, looking through our telescope, and just having a good time. And I had my 12-inch go-to telescope, and I was looking at a bunch of different things, and my battery died. And I said, "Oh, dang, my battery died." I was going to go look at this cluster in Cassiopeia. And you jumped up and said, "Oh, you don't need a go-to telescope. It's right up here." And then you took my telescope and you went, there it was. And I was so impressed because, you're an astrophotographer, but you earned your dues as a visual observer, and you knew your way around the sky. So I was very impressed.
Yeah, I can't. The go-to scopes are great. We all have them, and I wouldn't be without it. Last night I was trying to shoot, Corona Borealis. I realized, there's no go-to target I can type in. I have to actually move the telescope manually to find it. It's a bloody constellation.
Were you going for the Blaze star?
Yeah, I just posted a picture. I was just doing a before picture of Corona Borealis so that I would have the Blaze star in it to maybe get the after picture later on. It'll explode like it did for Leslie Pelche when you're sleeping. But anyway, we all love that. But the satisfaction to me, and we write this about, Terry and I was big on this as well, and we in the Backyard Astronomer's Guide, getting to know the sky and getting familiar with the sky and getting the sky as a familiar place is the ultimate satisfaction that comes to you from the hobby. And it isn't just tracking down objects and checking them off a list. Okay, we've been saying you should be doing that, but it isn't just that, because you could go to a go-to telescope and go zap, 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 seen them all and whatever. It's the satisfaction of knowing the sky, being able to point to stuff. That's that constellation, that's that star, whatever, and it becomes a familiar place to you. And that stays with you for the rest of your life. And whether it's finding faint fuzzies or just appreciating, an eclipse like we just had a month ago, or a beautiful sun, whatever it is, becoming skyware and looking up, that adds so much to your life. And as you guys were saying, going to a star party, and I hardly agree, get to a star party. I'm registered for Saskatchewan and the Southern Alberta Star Party here locally. Get to them because you get that energy of being with people who are equally, if not more enthusiastic than you are. And it just drives that interest and it perks you up again. Because in the last chapter of the Backyard Astronomer's Guide, we talk about why people leave the hobby. And it's often that they just don't have that. They're on their own all the time. And they don't have the RASC, or they don't have the Star Party. They don't have that energy input of people kind of motivating you, whatever. And you kind of lose interest as well. And so that community is fabulous. And then, you can work through your lists and get that community recognition from the certificate or whatever. And that's great. And so that's why the RASC is fantastic. It gives you that community and provides you these organized programs to participate in.
Well, we really appreciate that, Alan. That's just a really fantastic way to sum up what we're doing. And in fact, my Alan Dyer signed copy of the Backyard Astronomer's Guide, most recent edition, is just over here somewhere. If you recall, we ran into each other last summer, and you were kind enough to sign it for me. I appreciate that. And definitely one of the things that book did, and certainly if people are really looking to get started, getting a copy of the Backyard Astronomer's Guide or Night Watch or one of these other beginner texts is a great way to get going, especially when people are out just trying to learn how to get started in astronomy. And that's one of the things which Shane and I try to do with this show, and certainly appreciate Dave and Alan today and everybody else who's joined us here for this episode. So with that, I think we are getting close to time. Thanks so much again, Alan and Dave and Jenna, for lining this up. We do have to cut it off. So what I'm going to do is just read our outro. Please subscribe and share the show with other stargazers you know. Send us your show ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com. I don't have an end button. We won't do that, but we'll edit that in. But thanks so much, everybody, for being here today.
A lot of fun.
We do stick to time. That's what we have to do. So usually at this point, that's when we go for the beer. So. But we're happy to answer any questions or just turn it back over to you, Jenna. And
Thank you so much, Chris and Shane and Dave and Alan. That was fantastic. It was great to be involved in the live recording. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having us today. This was a blast. Love doing it. We've done almost this is our 423rd show in 4 years. So yeah, we've done a few of these. It's always a pleasure.
It's awesome. I'll send a link to the show website in the chat for those who have not already subscribed. We do have Lori wanted to mention one program, and Linda's got her hand up. Linda, do you want to unmute yourself? Do you have a question? All right, Linda's still muted. So Lori, then do you want to jump in and mention the outreach program that we have, or we're working on?
Yeah, just for people not really actually part of the observing program for the RASC, but the Education and Public Outreach Committee is going to be putting together what's called a novice certificate program that can be done in a night. Or in maybe over a couple of nights, and something very, very short, just very specific things about what you can see at a certain time of the year. And it's mainly for someone who would like to kind of have a group of really novice observers, things like Cubs or Scouts or some new observers in, and that they actually can get they can actually kind of do a little bit of observing, check off what they've seen, and then actually get a certificate to say, I'm a novice observer. And it's really just a real starting off point for that. And we'll have that probably up and running by the fall. So have a look for that. And it'll be under the Education and Public Outreach Committee. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. And Linda, you've got yourself unmuted now. Do you have a question?
Well, it's more of a comment to the people who are, very good at drawing and the photographers, is that there's a niche market out there, because I have been searching to find some cards, blank cards or whatever, and there are no cards available that I could find with pictures of astronomical or celestial bodies. And I just wanted to put that out, because if they're your photographs and your drawings, there are ways of manufacturing cards and maybe putting them up for sale, because I'll be your first customer.
Thanks, Linda. And with that, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Shane. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us. And we are on to our next presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.